Anxiety isn't the root cause, but sensory processing differences are. If you've heard that people say, just calm down, and they'd be able to tolerate the noise, the lights, etc., yeah, maybe being able to work with the nervous system is helpful in supporting sensory processing differences, but there's also another aspect we're missing. My name is Katie Connolly. Welcome to Glow Within. I'm a mom to two, craniosacral and somatic therapist and clinical counselor supporting neurodiverse families. So if you've tried the calming the anxiety approach and everything else will just be fine, but anxiety keeps rearing its head, this is a sign that we need to go a little bit deeper, right? So why is this anxiety, or the behavior maybe is what you're seeing, persisting? You've probably done all the therapies, speech language, BA, maybe a naturopath, maybe working with OTs. And I'm sure some have really helped, and it's important to have a very holistic approach to empowering our children, right? We're dynamic individuals. But I also have some tools that you can use to work at home with your child. This goes back to something that I started working with over 15 years ago called the primitive reflexes, and it's part of the whole course that I offer and the coaching. So you can do all of the breathing, you can do all of the rewards, the co-regulation, but your child still probably is very sensitive and struggles with maybe eating. Maybe it's the buzzing lights that they hear. That may sound odd, but you do hear them. Maybe it's the echo in the gym. Maybe it's the feeling of clothing on their skin. And if you remember from a few episodes ago, anxiety is not the cause. It's a signal, right? It's asking us to go a little bit deeper. And again, this is what heart-centered parenting is about. But that's difficult to get to if we as parents aren't nourished ourselves. So that's always the first step, nourishing ourselves. Then we can help to really work with our children on a deeper and more subtle level to help them thrive. So if we think about the nervous system like a home alarm system, if you will, the sensors pick up movement, right? So a loud sound, bright light, unexpected touch, etc., the alarm is going to go off. And so in our bodies, that shows up as anxiety. Anxiety might show up as sensory seeking, sensory avoidant. It might show up as more of a freeze response, not being able to process anything, or maybe struggling to even get the food in our mouth, right? It might show up as an inability to write. So for children who struggle with sensory processing, and this can include like apraxia, dyspraxia, so motor movement as well, there's a whole process that needs to happen from perceiving this stimuli, to processing it, to meaning making, to then reacting. And if there is a bit of a disconnect in any of those steps, we see, we're going to see in our children a lot of frustration. We're going to see anxiety, we're going to see meltdowns, or we're going to see these freeze responses where it might appear as defiance, just not wanting to do it and being avoidant. But again, like when we go a little bit deeper, it's what is really going on in their experience and how can we support them. So if we just treat the anxiety and like stop the alarm, for example, without checking why it went off, we end up silencing the message without addressing the cause. And we know what happens when we do that. It's going to go off again, right? Right. So it's really important when we're looking at anxiety or chronic anxiety in our children, particularly if they already do have a diagnosis, but often this shows up when a child doesn't have a diagnosis and the parent is wondering, why is this behavior always showing up? We need to look a little bit deeper. So we can look at the 8 senses. Yes, 8, not just 5. And you can go into the link below to read more about this, to really have a clear picture as to how we can support our children. So for many of our children who have sensory processing differences or are highly sensitive, neurodiverse, these sensitivities or these senses are like just turned up. They're amplified, right? Like turning up a radio really loud and constantly flooding them with input. So it becomes difficult to discern what to pay attention to and what really is could be filtered out, right? So the brain is doing an overwhelming amount of processing, huge amounts. And it's a lot. So it's not surprising that anxiety is something that shows up as a result, right? So if we were to imagine, I actually heard this example from someone else, walking into, they said Sam's Club, but I'm in Canada, so Costco, and it's Thanksgiving and Christmas and everything all at once. Imagine how you would feel. I know I would be running for the hills, thank you. I don't go to Costco at the best of times. So it's everything amplified. So it's not the anxiety that's causing the sensory overload. It is pure sensory overload. And so unfortunately, it can be difficult to rewire our children's brains, but there are some really powerful tools that we can use to help them do this. It's not necessarily going to be a fast process, but we have lots of tools at our disposal to help create new patterns because we are plastic, right? Or we are able to change. We're malleable. So it takes that repetition with our children to really help them to thrive. So it's interesting because I think some of our children will melt down in certain places or not in others. One that I commonly see is children will hold it together all day at school and then come home and melt down, right? Because we're ideally their safe space. It's again not them being defiant. It's not them being difficult, etc. They've been sort of on that brink of burnout all day. And so as soon as they get to that safe place, just like us maybe, if we've been overloaded all day, we need a place where we can collapse safely, right? So once we kind of shift our perspective and understand the brilliance in looking a little bit deeper in connecting with our heart, we can really start to support sensory processing from the ground up. So in practice, this might mean starting by observing patterns. So when does anxiety show up? What sensory input was just experienced? What physiological and emotional needs have not been met? What does the body need to feel more safe, connected, grounded? Is it movement? Is it less noise, less light? Is it a hug, that connection, softer light, being in nature? And this is where we can really begin to work with our children to understand their patterns, their triggers, and be able to then figure out which of the different aspects we can begin to work with. And this is a big part of the work that I do using a special system. So we can't think our way out of this dysregulation, right? We've talked about this before. We have to feel our way through it. And again, this is why I take that somatic approach and I work on the reflex integration. So really supporting the nervous system from the ground up. So the next time your child seems or shows anxiety, whether it be clinging to you, sensory seeking, withdrawal, maybe they're stimming, making lots of noises, instead of asking, why are they anxious? Try asking, what is their body experiencing right now? And so when we're able to shift from anxiety to understanding the sensory, the whole 8 sensory experience, we can take a really trauma-informed, body-based approach to parenting, or the somatic approach, and begin to help our children understand their bodies on a deeper level, which can be so empowering, and then we get to help them to thrive. So if you'd like to learn more with me, comment Nourish, and I'd love to be able to support you and your family.